Hey, what up, everybody? This is Mr. View, and I'm talking about World War One today. Yesterday, I asked you to research and give a little information about five of the weapons used in World War One. So I'm going to go over those weapons and kind of the way that they fought, because this is definitely a different war than previous battles and wars that were fought. So this changed everything, and this it gets us from the archaic times where people are lining up or hand-to-hand combat and shooting somebody in a line versus now we got machine guns, and it's a whole different ballgame. So we're going to advance to that today. But a little bit of review. Remember that there were five reasons that I covered for World War One: nationalism, pride in your country; imperialism, competing for other countries; militarism, glorify the military; alliances. Remember, it's not a one-on-one. Now it's two versus three versus four versus whatever. And then an assassination of Archduke Ferdinand from Austria-Hungary, who they were upset with Bosnia for killing their guy. Makes sense. They would not meet their ultimatum or final set of demands, so Bosnia pretty much called the bluff of Austria-Hungary. Austria-Hungary declared war. And in 1914, World War One starts. Everybody started to mobilize, which means get ready, or they declared their neutrality, which says I'm not going to support either side. And then Germany tried the Schlieffen plan, right? That was their idea. Let's not fight on two sides. Let's fight on one side. Let's knock out France, and then turn our attention to Russia and knock them out too, because they thought that Russia would be slower to mobilize and get ready. That was a mistake, though. Russia mobilized quicker than France or Germany believed, and so that was a problem for Germany. Today, we're going to talk about how the war was actually fought. It was useless. If useless is a word for war, I'm not sure if it's ever necessarily useful, but in this war, it was really bad. It was trench warfare for the most part, and they dug these big, deep trenches, and one side would be on one side over here, and one side would be on the other side over here, and they'd be a few hundred yards apart, and they'd shoot at each other, and they'd kill each other, right? And then they'd lob missiles or whatever, bombs, projectiles, however you want to say it, over at the other trench, try to soften them up. Then they'd run from one side of the trench to the other trench, and they try to take it over, and they push each other back. But they'd only be pushing them back little ways. So it was really useful. You're struggling for a month, 2 months, 3 months at a time just to get a mile of land. So it was really worthless. We would definitely not be doing this today. Okay, so this trench warfare was the way they fought. And these trenches, they're dirty and nasty. This is where the soldiers lived. They slept, they peed, they pooped, whatever they normally did in a day, they had to do in these trenches because that's where they were stuck, right? So within this, you'd get some lice, you'd get rats. It was dangerous, really, really dangerous place to live. Um, Very tough way to fight, right? So eventually, with these trenches, they developed something called crossfire, and this is where the soldiers would shoot diagonally, right? Because if this guy shoots straight, he's going to get this one guy. But if you shoot diagonally and your buddy shoots diagonally, like this, you can get everybody that crosses. And since they were using machine guns, this crossfire technique, one person on one side of the trench, another on another side of the trench, shooting like this, they could get a lot more people. They could kill a lot more people. So this trench warfare was really, really dangerous. And if you had to go over the top to the next trench, your chances of making it very slim. In the middle, they called this no man's land. And that was because no man wanted to be caught in there. Because if you did, you were probably going to die. Right? This is not a good place to be. So very dangerous. They didn't stay here in these trenches forever. They'd eventually get relieved and they'd be able to go back. But they'd fight for a little while. These guys would take this trench. These people would fall back. And then they'd take this trench and people would fall back. And then they'd get pushed back and pushed back. But very worthless way of fighting. Millions of people lost their lives in this type of warfare, and it wasn't very useful. You didn't get very much space. It's not like you were taking over a whole country at a time. Some of the other new weapons, I talked about the machine guns. At first, they were big. They were 4 to 6 dudes had to carry them around. They didn't shoot all that many rounds, but by the end of it, they were shooting 800 to 1,200 bullets or rounds a minute. So you could I mean, you could kill a lot of people shooting 800 to 1,200 rounds every minute that you shot. So machine guns were a humongous new weapon or advancement in World War
Student
One.
drivers are dismissed to leave. At this time,
Airplanes
all student
were another
drivers are
weapon,
dismissed to
new
leave.
weapon used in World War One, and it had very little effect though. They were used for observation a lot, and they were used for dog fights. You know, one plane zipping around and another plane zipping around, and you eventually somebody would shoot the other one down. But that was not a big deal. You're losing one pilot and one plane. They were mainly used for observation. Eventually, though, in World War II, we know that planes were a humongous part of war, and now even bigger part of war, right? Because not just because of the observation, but because how fast they are, what they can destroy with a single bomb and get out of Dodge. So planes are super, super valuable now. They did not have a huge impact on World War One. Submarines, however, did. Submarines were used to blockade countries, right? They'd be underwater. If a ship came in, they'd sink the ship, and that was a big deal. And this drags us into World War One. It's partially the reason that the United States gets involved. So submarines had a very big impact as far as really blockading countries early on in the war. Another new weapon was poison gas. And poison gas, eventually it gets outlawed, right? It's so bad that they outlaw it. But the French use it first, and then the other side uses it too. Chlorine and mustard gas, and it basically chokes you out. You know, a horrible, horrible, horrible way to die. And they would send it over to the trench, and boom, and everybody would get, choked up and start to die. Problem with poison gas is if the wind shifts, and you throw it over there, and all of a sudden, oh no, it's coming back at me, then you kill your own dudes. They developed gas masks eventually, and you see some funny pictures of World War One where the horse is wearing a gas mask. That's pretty funny. But gas masks came around. Like I said, eventually it gets outlawed because it's so dangerous. It's such a brutal way to die. Poison gas is gone now. You can't do that. The tank came around. The tank doesn't have a major effect either. Initially, these things get used in World War One, and they're really, really slow. They go like 3 miles per hour. They break down all the time. They get stuck all the time. So it wasn't a very good invention for World War One. However, this was the starting point. And eventually, the tanks of today, man, they fly around. They can do amazing things, right? It's way different than World War One, but back then, not a major effect. Another cool weapon was the flamethrower. Right? Everybody knows what a flamethrower is, and you could go by those trenches and whoa, light them all up, but not a big major effect either. Give me a machine gun before I get a flamethrower. Plus, I don't want that pack of stuff on my back. If I get shot, I get blown up. I'm out. So flamethrowers, no big effect. So today, what we learned is trench warfare was one of the ways that they fought during World War One. It was a very dangerous, dirty, nasty way to live. You get, if the rain would get in the trenches, you'd get trench foot because you're slogging around in that stuff all day. And
At this time, all walkers are dismissed to leave.
rats,
At this time,
you'd have to
all
go over the
walkers are
top,
dismissed to leave.
and a lot of people died without much gain. New weapons included machine guns, huge impact, airplanes, little impact, submarines, huge impact, poison gas, but outlawed, tank, no impact, and then the flamethrower, And that does it for today. I hope you learned a little bit something, and you got your assignment done yesterday about the weapons of World War One. We will get back at it again tomorrow with some specific battles. Whoop, whoop.